How does an autistic brain work? An internal explanation. Hello, I would really like to give you my explanation as to how I currently explain how an autistic brain works. And now you may not normally hear this concept explained in that way. There's various different ways people have explained it, but ultimately when people try to talk about an autistic experience, they normally start by trying to explain how we as autistic people look from the outside, as in they start describing all sorts of things, and then some explanations that do go for an internal explanation as to how does the autistic person actually experience the world, just kind of keep it surface level that autistic people see the world differently. That doesn't really tell us anything at all. So this is the explanation I've been using for around a year now, and I hope it works for you. Let's get your thoughts on this. So I need you to imagine this shape as our field of perception. So this is how we understand the world in a given moment. And how we do understand the world in a given moment, our brains make up that understanding of two different sources. So we have our preconceived ideas. So this is what we already know, / what we think might happen. So that there's a lot of social judging upon that. There's a lot of I think this will happen because of past experience. And then there is the other side of that, which is our sensory system, our live sensory input. Now this is our real-time data. This is what's actually coming in the moment. And the combination of those two things gives us an understanding as to how we view the world. Now, I'm going to really oversimplify this explanation because we could associate this with different parts of the brain, but I don't think that's helpful in the context of how I think we can understand autistic people better. So I'm actually not going to start with how an autistic person sees things. I'm going to start with a neurotypical, someone who isn't autistic. So I think a neurotypical person has far more reliance on the preconceived ideas portion of the brain when formulating how the world is viewed. Whereas we see opposite to that, I think we see a lot heavier reliance on sensory input from autistic people, so the raw data coming in. Now, both of these brains do the same thing. They can get to the end result the same eventually, both made up of the same inputs, but they're just different. We have diversity in our species, and that's acceptable. So what does this actually mean? It means that an autistic person is having a much more detailed view of the world because we are relying on more raw input data as opposed to generalizing ideas that we have understood in our past. So I think a really easy way to explain this a bit more is to bring it to life with an example. So if I would say a neurotypical person can perceive from -3 to 3, because in a given moment, that's simplification of course, a neurotypical person is experiencing -3 to 3. Not going to explain it more than that. What an autistic person is experiencing in comparison, I put from -5 to 5 and all of the detail in between. So what we're seeing there is a neurotypical brain filtering out the most extreme bits of information because it doesn't deem them necessary and creating a generalization as to what is there. Whereas the autistic brain is going, nah, give me all the data, give it all to me, whether I want to understand it or not, I'm going to use that information. And that kind of generally gives us an idea as to how we are understanding our world and how we are interacting with our world. So I think there are actually better labels that we can associate with this kind of concept. So being more detailed focused, we can kind of call more specialist. And being more overview focused, we can call generalist. Again, different approaches to life. These are concepts that very much exist in our society. And I think if we put them in this context, it helps give an idea as to why one shouldn't be deemed as less than. They're just different. And quite simply, with these different types of inputs going on, we can force our brains to get to the other type of thinking. It's just that they take more time, energy, and impact as a result of that. Now, I find it really interesting that in our society, I work a lot in the creative space, and you're normally told, no, you need to stop thinking about the detail, you need to think about the bigger picture. And I find that really interesting because I, as an autistic person, really have to think through all the details before I can form that bigger idea. Whereas I think, I think that's one of the subtle things embedded in our society that maybe we don't like to go to the detail because the neurotypicals find it hard. And we autistic people are constantly used to trying to get to that neurotypical perception, to get up to their level in their world. So yeah, I think explaining it this way, I'm showing them both side by side, completely neutrally. One is not better than the other, they just both exist. And that is fine, and that is great, and that should be celebrated. So that's my most recent explanation of how does an autistic brain work. And I'm going to bring this to life with more examples coming, and I'm probably going to expand it. This one will probably change a lot. Like, for example, I don't know whether I've just described a neurodivergent brain as opposed to an autistic brain. But for this context, I think it works, just leaving it described as an autistic brain. Thank you very much for watching. I'd love to know your thoughts. Give me as much detail as possible. I welcome detail. And maybe, is this in line with how you could think about an autistic brain or an autistic person as a result of that? So thank you very much, and I shall speak to you soon. I haven't got a consistent ending yet. How about bye?